Hello and welcome to our instructional series of videos. In this installment, we're going to show you how to upgrade or replace the drive in the main SATA bay of a 2019 21.5-inch iMac. This is an advanced installation with a risk of damage to your screen. It's highly recommended that you watch this video in its entirety before proceeding. If you're unsure about completing this installation yourself, professional installation is available. We've already backed up our data, gathered our materials, shut down and unplugged the iMac, and are working on a soft, static-free work surface. We are now ready to begin. The first thing we'll need to do is remove the display of the iMac. It's held in place with an adhesive around the edges, which you'll have to cut apart. This is an extremely tricky process which runs the risk of cracking the display, so you'll need to be very careful. Starting on one of the lower corners, insert the screen removal tool between the glass and the chassis. Take care not to put too much stress on the glass itself or it may crack. Work along all the edges of the iMac, taking care not to push the tool in too deep or pull out too far on the glass. All we're doing is cutting the tape holding the display on, not prying the glass away. The corners may also be a little tricky, so you may need to go over them a couple times. The process may take a little time, so be patient. Once you've worked your way all the way around, you can lay the computer face up on your work surface and attach the suction cups to the upper corners. Do one last check to make sure you've loosened all the adhesive around the edges of the iMac. Then lift the glass partway up using the suction cups. Inside, near the top, you'll need to detach two cables. For the first, simply slide it out of its socket. For the second cable, first lift up on the metal handle to unlock the connector, then slide the connector out. You can then angle the display the rest of the way up and remove the adhesive holding it. Simply grab the tab on each side of the adhesive strip and slowly pull it towards the center until it comes free. Finally, use your opening tool to slit the last little bit of adhesive along the center, and you should be able to remove the display and set it aside. Now's a good time to peel up any residual adhesive that remains on the iMac chassis so we can replace it later. Then, do the same for any adhesive on the back of the display. Let's start with the strip along the lip of the iMac, which is held in place with 5 small Phillips screws. You should then be able to slide the piece out of the iMac. Next, we'll remove the fan, which is held in by these 3 Torx T10 screws. Disconnect the fan cable by sliding its connector from its socket, and you should be able to lift the fan out of the iMac. Next, we'll move on to the left speaker. Start by loosening the 2 Torx T10 screws holding it in place, and then pulling slightly forward. The power button cable runs along channels in the speaker assembly. slide its connector from the socket and carefully remove the cable from the channels. Next, slide the speaker connector from its socket on the logic board, remove the cables from under the metal retainer, and untape it from the SATA cable. You should now be able to slide the speaker out the rest of the way. We can now remove the SATA drive itself. It's held in place by two retainers with 4 Torx T10 screws, which we'll need to remove. Once you've done that, you can lift the drive up slightly and detach it from the SATA cable, allowing you to remove it completely. You can install either a 2.5-inch SATA hard drive or a 2.5-inch SATA solid-state drive in the drive bay. For this installation, we'll be installing an OWC Mercury Extreme Pro SSD. We'll need to transfer these rubber pieces from the original drive to the new one. Simply peel them off the original drive, then press them into place on the new one. There should be enough residual adhesive left to allow them to stick. The drive is now ready to install into the iMac. Align the SATA connection on your drive with the one on the iMac's cable and slide the two together. You can then set the drive into its bracket. Place the two plastic retainers over the drive and secure them with the 4 Torx T10 screws. The retainer on the outer edge gets the two identical mid-sized screws. For the other side, the longest screw goes through the hole that goes through the power board, and the shortest screw goes in the upper hole that hangs over the SATA cable. Set the left speaker partially into place so that just the narrow end is under the lip of the iMac. Route the speaker cable behind the mounting post and alongside the SATA cable. Use the tape to help hold it in place, and slide it underneath the metal retainer clip. You can then slide the speaker cable into its socket. The solid wrap portion of the power button cable goes in the groove that runs along the face of the speaker assembly, and then the twisted wire part goes in the groove along the side. You can now move the speaker into place. This will allow you to slide the power button's cable connector into its socket. You can now tighten the speaker's 2 Torx T10 screws. Set the fan into place and secure it with its 3 Torx T10 screws. The one with the rubber standoff attached goes in the spot that's nearest the top of the iMac. You can then slide the fan connector into its socket. The last thing to replace is the strip along the bottom lip of the iMac. Take one of the longer Phillips screws and attach one of the corners, rotating the strip into place as you tighten the screw. Then, use the remaining longer screws to secure the other points, skipping the one in the center. The center hole can then be secured by the shorter screw that's remaining. We're now ready to close up. Set the display tape pieces in place according to the diagram that comes with your kit. You'll know their position correctly if all the holes and cutouts line up correctly with the shape of the iMac chassis. Once you've determined all the pieces of tape have been placed correctly, peel off the backing and adhere them to their places on the iMac. You can help line things up easier by inserting a pointed object through the hole in the tape and using it to line the tape up with the corresponding hole in the iMac's chassis. You can then peel off the backing on the other side of the tape to expose the adhesive that will attach the display. Set the display along the bottom edge, as flush with the lip and as centered as possible, but don't let it close yet as we need to reconnect the last two cables. Reattach the video cable by sliding the connector into its socket and locking it into place with the handle. Then, simply slide the last connector into its socket. You can now carefully lower the display into place, making sure you have the edges lined up correctly. Gently squeeze along the edges to make sure the adhesive sticks. Use a microfiber cloth to avoid any extra fingerprints. You can now remove the suction cups and clean any remaining marks off your iMac. You can now plug your iMac back in, hook it up, and turn it on.